Be me, Joe. 32, sysadmin for a mid-sized company. Life is pretty quiet. I like it that way. Work from home most days, keep the servers running, solve other people's problems so I don't have to deal with my own. My evenings are for my hobbies. I have two big ones. One is collecting and growing rare orchids. Phalaenopsis, cattleyas, the weird Dracula orchids that look like little monkeys. It's a quiet, methodical thing. Takes patience. My other hobby is watching old black and white movie musicals, the ones from the 30s and 40s. Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Gene Kelly, pure escapism. No deep messages, just incredible talent and guys in well-fitted suits. For about 3 years, my life also included Julie. When we met, she was great, sharp, funny, ambitious, worked in marketing. She thought my hobbies were quirky and cute. She'd even sit with me in my greenhouse room while I repotted the orchids, asking questions about the different species. She pretended to enjoy the old movies, or at least tolerated them. We were comfortable. I thought we were happy. Looking back, the change was slow, like water erosion. It probably started about a year before the end. Her job got more intense, and she got way more into online culture. Every conversation started to feel like a vocabulary test for the latest social justice buzzwords. Suddenly, everything had to be unpacked. My quiet hobbies were the first things to go under her microscope. One evening, I was showing her a new orchid that had finally bloomed after 2 years. A Paphiopedilum, a lady's slipper. Really complex flower. I was proud of it. She looked at it, not with interest, but with this weird analytical stare. Said something like, "It's interesting how you pour so much energy into controlling these delicate things. It's a very masculine need to cultivate and control beauty." I just blinked. "It's a plant, Julie. I give it water and light. It does the rest, but I let it slide." A few weeks later, we were watching Top Hat, a classic. Halfway through, she paused it. "Can we just acknowledge the problematic gender dynamics at play here?" I didn't know what to say. It's a movie from 1935. It's a product of its time. It's just supposed to be fun. It felt like she was looking for reasons to be unhappy with things I enjoyed. The conversations got heavier after that. She started talking a lot about emotional labor. It felt like I was constantly being graded on my ability to anticipate her moods. Spoiler, I was a failing student. She'd come home from work in a bad mood, and if I didn't immediately launch into a perfect 20-step emotional support protocol, I was unsupportive and emotionally distant. If I was quiet and just wanted to decompress after my own long day, I was stonewalling her. It was exhausting. It felt like I was dating a human resources department. Every interaction was a potential performance review. My home, my sanctuary, started to feel like a minefield. The final straw was a conversation that I barely even remember starting. It was a Tuesday night. I was tired. She was talking about some drama with her friends, and I must have not been giving the right nonverbal cues. She stopped mid-sentence. "You're not even listening, are you? You just retreat into your own world. It's like I'm not even here." I told her I was tired, that I was listening, but maybe we could talk about it tomorrow. This was apparently the worst possible thing I could have said. It led to a long, circular argument that ended with her sleeping on the couch. The next evening, she sat me down. The classic "we need to talk" pose. I knew what was coming. Part of me was relieved. She gave the speech. It sounded rehearsed. It wasn't me, it was her. She needed to grow, and our energies were no longer aligned. She felt she was doing all the work in the relationship. I was holding her back with my lack of ambition and emotional immaturity. I didn't argue. There was no point. You can't reason with a verdict that's already been decided. I just nodded and said I understood. My lack of a dramatic reaction seemed to annoy her more than anything else. Maybe she wanted a fight, something to confirm her narrative of me being a difficult person. I just didn't have the energy. I was done. I helped her pack her things over the next few days. It was civil, cold, but civil. The day she left, I stood in the empty-feeling apartment and felt nothing. Just a vast, quiet emptiness. I went into my greenhouse room, checked on my orchids, and put on an old record. The silence was a relief. For about a week, it stayed that way. Pure, uninterrupted silence. I started to feel like myself again. I was starting to heal. Then my phone started vibrating and wouldn't stop. A dozen text messages in a minute. From my brother, a couple of old college friends, a coworker. All of them were variations of, "Dude, are you okay?" and "Don't look at Julie's social media." Of course, that's the first thing I did. It was a mistake. She had written a post. Not just a short "I'm single now" update. It was an essay, a manifesto, complete with a dramatic filtered photo of her staring thoughtfully out a coffee shop window. The title was "On Healing and Escaping Covert Male Toxicity." It was long, easily a few thousand words. She never used my name. She didn't have to. The details were surgical. She laid out every private, vulnerable thing I had ever shared with her and reframed it as a symptom of a deep-seated psychological flaw. My orchid collection? It was a manifestation of a desire to control and possess fragile beauty, a stand-in for the emotional control he couldn't exert over a strong woman. She described my careful attention to their needs, light, humidity, fertilizer, as a performative, obsessive practice to avoid engaging in genuine human connection. My love for old movie musicals, that was even worse. She called it a deeply problematic retreat into patriarchal nostalgia. She claimed I was romanticizing an era where men were men and women were decorative objects, and that this informed my subconscious inability to see her as an equal partner. My calm, non-confrontational nature, my desire to avoid pointless arguments, that was the worst part. She had a whole section on it. She labeled it advanced passive aggression and weaponized incompetence. She wrote that my quietness was a form of gaslighting, designed to make her feel like she was being hysterical for having normal emotional needs. Every single intimate detail of our life together was twisted and put on public display as evidence in the trial of my character. The post was a work of art in a horrifying way. She had woven a narrative so compelling that, for a second, even I almost believed it. Then I read the comments. There were hundreds of them, all from her friends, colleagues, and online followers. "So brave of you to share your story. This is so important. Thank you for giving a voice to this. I knew there was something off about him. My intuition never lies. Stay strong, Queen. You're better off without that kind of toxic energy." It was a public execution. My character was being assassinated, and the crowd was cheering. My first instinct was to fight back, to write my own post, defending myself, pointing out the lies and exaggerations, to post screenshots of her own texts to show the hypocrisy. My fingers were hovering over the keyboard, but then I stopped. I realized that anything I said would just be used as more evidence against me. If I responded calmly, it was proof of my cold, manipulative nature. If I responded with anger, it was proof of my suppressed rage and male fragility. There was no way to win. It was a perfectly designed trap. She hadn't just ended our relationship, she had salted the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. So, I did the only thing I could. Nothing. I deactivated my social media accounts. All of them. I changed my phone number and only gave it to my immediate family and a few trusted friends. I cut off contact with every single mutual friend who had liked or commented on her post. I became a ghost. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The feeling of being so completely misrepresented, so publicly shamed, was nauseating. It was a profound betrayal. She had taken the parts of me I had trusted her with most and turned them into weapons to hurt me and elevate herself. The next few months were a blur. I threw myself into my work. I automated systems. I rewrote legacy code. I became the most productive sysadmin in the company's history. I spent hours in my greenhouse. It was the only place that felt safe. The plants didn't judge. They didn't have narratives. They just needed care, and they grew. I built a new routine. Work, gym, greenhouse, sleep, repeat. The anger eventually faded, replaced by a deep, deep cynicism about people. I figured I was done with relationships. The risk was just too high. The peace and quiet of being alone was better than the drama and potential for that kind of betrayal. About 6, maybe 7 months after the whole thing, my boss told me I had to attend a small local IT conference. I really didn't want to go. People, networking, small talk, a nightmare. But it was mandatory. So I went, drove to a boring hotel conference center, got my lanyard, and prepared for a day of lukewarm coffee and PowerPoint presentations. Most of the talks were exactly as dull as I expected. But then one of the keynote speakers came on stage. Her name was Roberta. She was probably in her early 40s, director of operations for a big tech firm in the city. She wasn't a bubbly girl boss type. She was calm, direct, and incredibly sharp. Her presentation was on logistics and systems architecture. No fluff, no buzzwords, just pure, elegant competence. I was actually impressed. After her talk, there was a networking break. I was trying to hide in a corner with my coffee when she walked over. She had noticed the name of my company on my badge. "You guys do good work with your data infrastructure," she said. No small talk, just straight to it. We ended up talking for almost an hour about server stacks, database management, the pros and cons of different cloud services. It was the easiest conversation I'd had with a stranger in years. At the end, she handed me her business card. "If you ever get tired of your current gig, give me a call. I'm always looking for people who actually know what they're talking about." I thought that was the end of it. But a few days later, I found her on that professional networking site and sent a connection request with a short message, thanking her for the chat. She replied almost immediately. We messaged back and forth for a week or two, strictly professional stuff at first, but the conversation slowly drifted into other topics, hobbies, interests, life. I was cautious, very cautious. I kept my guard up. But she was different. She was logical. She didn't deal in drama. When I eventually, vaguely mentioned my hobbies, she didn't analyze them. She just said, "Oh, orchids? That's cool. It must take a lot of discipline." That was it. No psychological deep dive. Just a simple, respectful acknowledgement. After a few weeks of messages, she asked if I wanted to get dinner. I hesitated for a full day before replying. Part of me was screaming that it was a terrible idea, that I was just opening myself up to get hurt again. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, was just tired of being alone. I said yes. We went to a quiet Italian restaurant. The conversation was as easy in person as it was online. We didn't talk about past relationships. We just talked about life, work, books, the future. There were no tests, no hidden meanings. At the end of the night, she just smiled and said, "I had a really nice time, Joe." And that was it. No games. We started seeing each other regularly after that. It was slow. It was mature. She was a busy, successful woman. I was a quiet guy with a quiet life. It just worked. She never pressured me to talk about my past. She let me open up on my own terms. One night, a couple of months in, she came over to my place for the first time. I was nervous about showing her the greenhouse room. The ghost of Julie's analysis was still in the back of my mind. I opened the door, and she just stood there for a second, looking at all the plants. I braced myself for a comment. She turned to me, a genuine smile on her face, and said, "Wow, Joe, this is incredible. It's so peaceful in here." I almost cried with relief. Things were good. For the first time in what felt like forever, my life felt genuinely stable and happy. I had no idea that Julie's carefully constructed online world and my new, quiet reality were on a collision course. And I had no idea that Roberta was about to be the asteroid. Life with Roberta was different. It was calm. There was no drama, no walking on eggshells. We had our own lives, our own careers, and we met in the middle. We'd cook dinner together a few nights a week, talk about our days. She was fascinated by my work, the actual nuts and bolts of it. She'd ask me to explain complex server issues, and she'd actually listen and understand. She respected my expertise. In return, I'd listen to her talk about managing her teams, dealing with corporate politics, planning multi-million-dollar projects. I learned a lot just by listening. She never once made me feel like my quiet life was less than. If anything, she seemed to appreciate it, a refuge from her high-stress world. My past with Julie felt like it belonged to another person. I never talked about it. The shame of that public post was still there, buried deep. I didn't want to bring that toxicity into this new, clean space I had built with Roberta. One evening, I think it was a Thursday, she came over after a long day at work. She was venting a little about her department. She mentioned they were in the middle of a big restructuring and a major promotion was on the line for the head of the marketing team. She talked about the two front runners. One was a guy who was solid, dependable, maybe a little uninspired, but always delivered results. The other was a woman who was a real go-getter, a social media powerhouse. in her words. She said this woman was brilliant at creating buzz and had a huge online following, but that her management style was a bit dramatic. A little alarm bell went off in the back of my head, but I ignored it. Marketing is full of people like that. It's a big city. The chances were astronomical. I just nodded and listened, offering my support. A few weeks went by. The promotion was getting closer. Roberta was getting more stressed. The decision was ultimately hers. She said the marketing woman was really pushing hard, constantly trying to impress her, always talking about empowerment and synergy and all the other corporate buzzwords. It sounded vaguely familiar, but I still didn't make the connection. Why would I? Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly. Roberta came over. She was supposed to be staying the night, but she was quiet, not tired quiet, tense quiet. We ate dinner, and she barely said a word. After, we were sitting on the couch, and I finally just asked her what was wrong. She sighed and looked at me. She told me she had made her decision about the promotion, and in the process, she had discovered something deeply unsettling about one of the candidates. I asked what she meant. She explained that part of her vetting process for any leadership role is a thorough review of a candidate's public online presence. It's not about digging for dirt, she said. It's about assessing judgment. How do they present themselves? Are they professional? Do they engage in endless online arguments? Do they demonstrate the kind of stability you'd want in a department head? She said she had spent the afternoon reviewing the profile of the female candidate, the marketing powerhouse. She started describing the social media page, all about branding, female empowerment, a carefully curated image of success and enlightened thinking. Then, she said, she scrolled back through the person's history, about a year back, and she found a post, a very, very long post. My stomach went cold. She described it clinically, from a risk assessment perspective. A long, detailed essay about a former partner. She said it was a masterclass in character assassination, written under the guise of sharing a healing journey. She told me how the post methodically took apart the ex-boyfriend's character, using his hobbies and personality traits as evidence of his supposed toxicity. I just sat there, frozen. I couldn't breathe. Roberta kept talking, not yet noticing my reaction. It was the details that were so shocking, she said. She was mocking him for the most harmless things. Apparently, he grew orchids. My blood turned to ice. She wrote this whole psychoanalysis about how his need to cultivate flowers was a sign of a controlling personality. Roberta shook her head, still looking at the floor as she spoke. Then she went after him for liking old movies. Called it problematic nostalgia. Can you imagine? The sheer arrogance. She finally looked up at me, and she saw my face. The color must have completely drained from it. I felt like I was going to be sick. Her professional, detached expression just melted away. "Joe, what is it?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed a shaking finger toward the greenhouse room. Her eyes followed my finger. Then they came back to my face. Understanding dawned. It was slow, and then it was total. I saw her mind connecting the dots, the orchids, my quiet nature. The offhand comment I'd once made about an ex thinking my hobbies were toxic. Her face hardened, not with anger at me, with a cold, quiet fury I had never seen before. "The candidate," I finally managed to say. "Her name is Julie, isn't it?" Roberta just nodded slowly. She didn't ask me for my side of the story. She didn't need to. She had read the primary source document. She had seen the evidence Julie herself had provided to the world. "I am so sorry, Joe," she said, her voice low and firm. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I'm sorry for bringing it back into your life." We sat in silence for a long time. She told me what she saw in that post, not as a betrayed ex-boyfriend's new partner, but as a senior executive. She saw a person with catastrophic judgment, someone willing to air intensely personal details for public validation, someone who demonstrated a profound lack of loyalty and discretion, the two qualities most essential for a leadership position. She saw a massive liability. What would happen if she had a disagreement with a colleague? Would she write a thinly veiled takedown of them online? What if she was privy to sensitive company information? Could she be trusted to keep it confidential? The answer, based on the evidence Julie had so proudly displayed, was a resounding no. Her attempt to build her brand by destroying my character had just shown Roberta's exactly what kind of person she was. And it was a person you could never, ever trust with power. The next day, I was a wreck. I couldn't focus on work. I was waiting for some kind of explosion, a phone call, an angry email, something. Nothing came. Roberta came home that evening looking tired but resolved. She told me the decision had been announced at work. The promotion went to the other guy, the quiet, dependable one. Julie wasn't fired. That would be too dramatic, too messy. Instead, Roberta had approved her transfer. She was being moved to a new strategic initiative, a corporate euphemism for a dead-end project with no budget, no staff, and no future. She was being sidelined, placed in a professional oubliette where she could do no harm. Her career at that company was effectively over. She just might not realize it for a few more months. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic scene. It was a quiet, clinical, corporate execution. And Julie never knew why. She would probably blame the patriarchy or assume the male candidate was favored. She would create a new narrative to fit her worldview. She would never know that the weapon she had forged to destroy me was the same one that had silently and precisely ended her own ambitions. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't happiness, not exactly. It wasn't a desire for revenge. It was validation. A quiet, profound validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't toxic. I wasn't emotionally immature. I was just a quiet guy who liked orchids and old movies. And a smart, successful, rational person had looked at the exact same facts as Julie's cheering section and had seen the truth. Roberta's judgment was like a final, cleansing fire, burning away the last remnants of the shame and self-doubt that Julie's betrayal had left behind. A few weeks later, things were back to normal. A new normal. It was a Saturday afternoon. Roberta was reading on the couch. I was in the greenhouse room, trimming the leaves on a cattleya. She walked in and stood next to me, watching. "It really is peaceful in here," she said again. I nodded. I looked around at my plants, these quiet living things that had been my only comfort during the worst time in my life. They had been called symbols of my toxicity. But now, in this quiet moment, with this good woman by my side, I knew what they really were. They were proof of my patience, proof of my ability to care for something, proof that if you just keep providing the right conditions, quietly and consistently, things will eventually bloom. And I was finally blooming again.